It was a Tuesday afternoon when my boss, Blake Morrison, called me into his office. I'd been at Cascade Analytics for 4 years, delivering top performance and handling the responsibilities of a senior data analyst for over a year, especially after Greg Thompson left. The role had officially opened 3 months ago, and everyone assumed I was the natural choice. "Quinn, have a seat," Blake said, barely looking up from his screen. I sat trying to steady my nerves. This had to be about the promotion. He finally looked at me. "We've decided to go with someone else. An external candidate, Derek Paulson from Wellington Tech." The words hit hard. But I've been doing that job. My numbers, my client reviews, they're all strong. "You're solid," he replied, "but not ready for the next level. You need more seasoning, more maturity." He dismissed my request for specific feedback with vague talk of leadership intuition, and told me to keep being a team player. I walked back to my desk in shock. That night I stayed until 8 polishing his presentation, work I always did without question. As I left, I saw his office dark. He'd gone home at 5:30 while I worked late doing his job. Driving home it hit me, I wasn't being rewarded for excellence. I was being exploited. Why promote me if they could get senior-level work for a junior salary? The next morning I arrived at exactly 9 o'clock. My official start time. No more early hours. And when Amanda Chin came by, panicked about her report, I said, "I'm sorry, but I've got my own deadlines." "Have you talked to Blake?" He stared at me stunned. I'd never said no before. Blake called me in shortly after. "Amanda said you wouldn't help. What's going on?" "I'm focused on my assigned work," I said calmly. "Mentoring isn't in my job description." "It's about teamwork," he insisted. "And I'm being a team player by delivering my work at a high standard. If Amanda needs support, her supervisor should provide it." He frowned. "That's me. Then perhaps you can step in." Back at my desk I actually worked. Undistracted, productive. At noon I took my full lunch break and left the building, something I hadn't done in years. By afternoon word had spread. When Nathan Cooper asked for last-minute visuals, I told him to submit a formal request. I was doing my job, nothing more, nothing less. If you're new here and enjoying these powerful stories, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Let me know in the comments what part of today's story touched you most. Lydia Foster, an executive, emailed asking for a summary for her board presentation, something I'd have dropped everything for before. This time I replied that my next availability was the following Tuesday. By mid-afternoon Blake called sharply, "Hi office. Now." He stood by the window, arms crossed. "What the hell is going on with you today? You've turned down 4 requests, took a full lunch break, acting like you're doing the bare minimum." "I'm doing my job. The one I'm paid to do. It's about team culture, not just job descriptions." "Then why isn't that culture rewarding people who do senior-level work without the title or pay?" "I'm aligning my effort with my compensation." "This is about the promotion, isn't it? Are you throwing a tantrum?" "No. I'm being strategic. You said I need more maturity. Well, maturity means setting boundaries. Derek's starting next month. Let him do the senior analyst work." Blake had no response. He couldn't punish me for doing my job well and leaving on time. "This is disappointing," he said. "I thought you had more potential." "So did I replied. "Was there anything else?" He waved me off. I left at 5 sharp while others watched in silence. The rest of the week I kept the same pace, on time, focused, no extras. By Friday the impact showed. Amanda's report was delayed, Nathan's pitch fell flat, Lydia's presentation was underprepared. None of it was my problem. At a tense team meeting, Blake preached teamwork and collaboration. Eyes fixed on me. "Are we compensated for that extra work?" I asked calmly. "Because you want senior-level output without senior-level recognition." The room went silent. Blake exploded. "My office. Now." Inside he accused me of undermining him. "I'm pointing out a contradiction," I said. "You want my skills but not my worth. I won't do free labor anymore. You're burning bridges. Or learning which ones are worth crossing." I stood. "It's 5:15. Have a good weekend." That weekend I wrestled with doubt. But I knew I wasn't the problem. The system was. Monday morning I walked in at 9, heart pounding. Amanda looked away. Nathan ignored me. As I dove into a complex client analysis, the phone rang. Quinn Carter speaking. Quinn, this is Eleanor Fitzpatrick from HR. Can you come down to my office? Eleanor from HR called me in, mentioning complaints about my changed work habits, refusing extra tasks, leaving at 5, challenging management. I asked for specifics. What policies had I broken? What work was late or subpar? She hesitated. Your assigned work is on time and excellent. The issue isn't your performance. It's that you're no longer doing other people's jobs. Off the record, she admitted, I've seen this before. You were the go-to person for everything. Now that you've set boundaries, people are uncomfortable. When I asked if I was going to be fired, she said no. Professionally and legally I was in the clear. But she warned about reputations. So is being paid fairly not important? I replied. She smiled slightly. Yes, that too. She handed me her card. If there's retaliation, let me know. I left feeling validated but wary. The week stayed tense. Blake gave me cold looks and terse emails. The team was divided. Some respected my stance, others felt abandoned. But soon the cracks showed. Amanda's client report went out with errors Blake didn't catch. Tyler missed deadlines because I wasn't there to structure his work. The department's output slipped. Then unexpectedly Helen Wright, the COO, called me to her office, 3 levels above Blake. I've been reviewing the analytics department, she began. Your accounts have the highest satisfaction and completion rates. You've trained new hires, though it's not in your job description. And despite 4 years of stellar reviews, no promotion. Why do you think they chose an external candidate? Felt like a trap. But I answered honestly, because I was already doing senior-level work for junior pay. They told me I lacked maturity, vague feedback with nothing to improve on. So now I only do what's in my role, unless it's formally recognized and compensated. And that's caused disruption. Yes. Because I was covering gaps that should have been handled by leadership. Now those gaps are visible. Helen leaned back, thoughtful. Tell me, how would you redesign this department? Surprised, I laid out the flaws. Ad hoc mentoring instead of structured training, unrealistic timelines, constant urgent requests, and compensation misaligned with market value. She listened intently, taking notes. After nearly an hour, she said, "This has been enlightening. Changes are coming. I'll be in touch." I returned to my desk, stunned. That conversation had shifted something, but I had no idea how much. The next Monday, Blake called an emergency meeting. For the first time he looked uncertain. Effective immediately, he announced, I'm moving to a strategic advisory role. The department will be restructured. Silence filled the room. Helen will speak to each of you individually. That's all I know. Rumors exploded. Demotion? Dissolution? Layoffs? I stayed focused, but fear gripped me. Whatever was happening, it started with me. If it backfired, I'd take the fall. Helen's assistant called to schedule a meeting for Wednesday morning. I barely slept Tuesday night. When I arrived, Helen and Eleanor from HR were waiting. I've reviewed the analytics department, Helen said. There are structural issues impacting performance and morale. I'm restructuring into 2 teams, client and strategic analytics, each led by a director. I'd like to offer you the director of client analytics role. I stared at her. Blake said I wasn't ready. And what about Derek? Derek will lead strategic analytics. His strengths complement yours. As for Blake, he's being reassigned to focus on business development where he excels. His assessment of you was flawed because you were already doing senior-level work without complaint. That made you too valuable to promote in his eyes, but not in mine. She leaned forward. I'm offering you this role because of your skills, client relationships, and insights, not because you pushed back. Your actions revealed systemic problems. I need a leader who advocates for their team and values sustainable performance over burnout. Do you understand? Yes. Good. So what do you say? I thought of 4 years of unpaid effort, of being told I wasn't ready while doing the job anyway. Yes, I said. I accept. The transition was swift. Within weeks, the new structure was announced. Blake moved on quietly. Derek turned out to be a strong partner who valued my institutional knowledge. My team, Amanda, Tyler, Nathan, and new hire Zoe Lambert, joined me for our first meeting. From now on, I said, we work within clear boundaries. Overtime will be tracked and compensated. Urgent requests will be handled as a team, not dumped on one person. The days of silent sacrifice are over. Relief washed over their faces. We implemented structured onboarding, realistic timelines, regular check-ins, and shared after-hours coverage. Results followed. Completion rates rose, client satisfaction stayed high, and morale improved dramatically. 6 months later, I ran into Blake at a coffee shop. "I owe you an apology," he admitted. "I took advantage of your work ethic because it made my life easier." "I appreciate that," I said. "You're doing a great job. The team looks happy." "They are. Because they're not being exploited." He winced but nodded. "I'm realizing I wasn't managing, I was just pushing people. Turns out that makes you someone others want to escape. It's not too late to learn." "No," he said. "Good luck, Quinn." "I mean that." "You too." A year after my promotion, Helen gave me my review. "Your team has the highest metrics in the division. Client retention up 18%. Delivery times improved by 23%. Team satisfaction? Highest we've seen." "We built a sustainable model," I replied. "People know their work is valued." "It's exactly the leadership we need," she said. "You're getting another raise, and start thinking about succession. I see you moving up." As I left, I reflected. Helen saw my value and wanted to grow it. Blake saw it and wanted to extract it. The difference wasn't just management, it was respect. That evening I left at 5:30, because I was done, not to make a point. Passing Derek's office, he waved. My phone buzzed with a message from Zoe. "Thanks for the feedback today. Really helped." I smiled. "That's what I'm here for. Great work." That was the difference. Mentoring wasn't an extra. It was the job. Just like my contributions had never been favors. They were work that deserved recognition. It took 4 years and one brutal conversation to learn. Going the extra mile only matters if someone meets you there. Being a team player doesn't mean carrying everyone else while getting left behind. The moment I stopped volunteering my worth and started setting boundaries, everything changed. Not through rebellion, but by forcing a broken system to reveal its cracks. Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is refuse to be exploited. The bravest choice is doing exactly what you're paid for. Nothing more, nothing less, until your value is recognized. 3 months later, I presented my team's structured development framework to the executive leadership. No more informal, unpaid mentorship or invisible work. Clear criteria, fair recognition. When challenged about limiting high performers, I said, if someone consistently operates above their level, we promote them. Harvesting extra effort without reward isn't development, it's exploitation. The room fell silent. Helen backed me up. People stay when they feel valued, not taken advantage of. Afterward, department heads approached me for advice. Even Gregory Stone, who admitted he'd lost top talent by expecting silent sacrifice. I had an assistant now, Stephanie Park, and I made sure she was paid fairly and had growth opportunities. The cycle of exploitation stopped with me. That night my mom called. "You have to let people see what they're losing before they appreciate what they have," she reminded me. He was right. I'd learned the hard way. The workplace isn't a meritocracy. It's a negotiation. My phone buzzed, an email from Derek. Silverton wanted to expand their analytics package and asked for me to lead it. That was the power of sustainable excellence. Clients noticed the difference when quality wasn't built on burnout. In the following months, we hired Ryan Fitzgerald, whose previous job demanded constant availability with no recognition. He understood sustainable performance. We brought him on and he quickly became a key contributor. I made recognition meaningful, specific, public, tied to real rewards. And when Eleanor told me Blake was resigning, she shared his message. Working with me had taught him more about real leadership than anything else. He was moving on, but he was grateful. Change didn't happen because I left. It happened because I refused to enable the dysfunction. He said that working with you this past year, seeing how you manage your team, taught him more about leadership than he'd learned in his entire career before that. He knows he handled things poorly with you and he's grateful you gave him a chance to see a different way. I was genuinely touched. That's unexpected. Good for him, I guess. I hope the new role works out. Me too. Eleanor stood to leave, then turned back. You know, Quinn, what you did, setting those boundaries, refusing to accept being undervalued, it sent ripples through this whole organization. Other people started questioning whether they were being treated fairly. Some departments made changes. Others lost good people who finally felt empowered to leave. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's an honest thing. And honest is what we need. She smiled. Keep doing what you're doing. After she left, I sat thinking about Blake. I didn't feel vindictive or triumphant about his resignation. Mostly I felt grateful that the situation had resolved in a way that worked for everyone. He'd found a role that better suited his strengths. I'd found a role where I could build something sustainable. The team was thriving. That evening we had a team dinner to celebrate closing a major project ahead of schedule. As I sat at the table with Amanda, Tyler, Nathan, Zoe, Ryan, and Stephanie, listening to them laugh and share stories, I felt something I hadn't felt in my early years at Cascade: contentment. This team wasn't perfect. We had challenges and disagreements. Projects still ran into problems. Clients still had unreasonable requests sometimes. But we handled it all without anyone being martyred. Without anyone sacrificing their well-being to prop up a dysfunctional system. Without anyone doing senior-level work for junior-level pay. Quinn, Amanda said, pulling me from my thoughts. I just want to say thank you. I know I was one of the people who relied on you too much before, and I also know I was weird about it when you set boundaries. But this past year has been the best year of my career. I've actually learned how to do my job properly instead of just frantically asking for help. I appreciate that, Amanda. You've come a long way. We all have, Tyler added. I actually take vacations now without checking email every 5 minutes. It's wild. Ryan raised his glass. To sustainable excellence and managers who actually give a damn. We all clinked glasses and I felt a warm glow that had nothing to do with the wine. 2 years after that Tuesday afternoon in Blake's office, I was sitting in Helen's office again. This had become a regular occurrence. Helen liked to have informal check-ins with her department heads beyond the formal review process. I'm going to be direct, Helen said. We're creating a vice president of analytics position. It would oversee both client and strategic analytics, with Derek and whoever takes over strategic reporting to you. I want you to take it. My heart skipped. Derek's leaving? Derek's been offered an amazing opportunity at Apex Technologies. He gave notice this morning. He recommended you for the VP role, by the way. Said you're the best leader he's ever worked with. I felt a surge of emotion. Derek and I had become genuine partners over the past 2 years, and his endorsement meant a lot. This would mean more strategic responsibility, Helen continued. You'd be involved in company-wide decisions about how we use data and analytics across all departments. You'd have a seat at the executive table. And yes, there's a significant compensation increase. Can I think about it? Of course. But Quinn, I want you to know something. You've transformed not just your department, but how this entire company thinks about employee development and sustainable performance. That conversation we had 2 years ago when you laid out all the structural problems, you weren't wrong about any of it. And you've proven that addressing those problems leads to better outcomes for everyone. I had good motivation to see clearly, I said dryly. Helen laughed. Being passed over for a promotion you deserved? Yes, that tends to clarify things. But a lot of people in that situation just leave. You stayed and built something better. I thought about that as I drove home that evening. I could have left. Probably should have, by conventional wisdom. The advice columns and career coaches all said the same thing. If you're not valued where you are, find somewhere that will value you. But I'd taken a different path. I'd set boundaries, stopped subsidizing dysfunction, and forced the system to adapt or break. And it had adapted. That wasn't the right choice for everyone or every situation. Sometimes leaving really is the best option. Sometimes the dysfunction runs too deep to fix. Sometimes the people in power are too invested in the status quo. But in this case it had worked. Because once I stopped making it easy for the company to undervalue me, they'd had to confront the real cost of my contributions. And someone, Helen, had been paying attention. I accepted the VP position. My first major initiative was rolling out the development framework we'd built in client analytics across the entire analytics division. Then across the entire company. There was resistance, of course. Some managers complained that it was too rigid, that it stifled flexibility. But what they really meant was that it prevented them from extracting free labor from their teams. In a company-wide town hall 6 months after I became VP, an analyst from the finance department raised her hand during Q&A. I just want to say that the new development framework has changed my experience here completely. For the first time, I understand what I need to do to advance. My manager can't just tell me I'm not ready anymore without explaining specifically what I need to work on. And when I do extra work, it actually counts towards something instead of just disappearing. The room erupted in applause. I saw several executives looking uncomfortable, but Helen was nodding approvingly. After the meeting, the finance analyst approached me. I heard about what you did 2 years ago. How you just stopped doing free work until they had to recognize your value. That story circulates around here like legend. It inspired me to ask for a promotion I'd been putting off, and I got it. I'm glad it worked out for you, I said. But I didn't do anything heroic. I just stopped accepting less than I deserved. Yeah, but that's the hardest thing. Especially for women. We're taught that standing up for ourselves makes us difficult. That we should be grateful for what we have. You showed a lot of us that we could push back and survive. That we didn't have to accept crumbs and call it appreciation. That conversation stayed with me. I'd thought of my boundary setting as a personal decision, a reaction to my specific situation. But apparently it had become something larger. A symbol to others that change was possible. 3 years after my promotion to VP, I was having lunch with my mom. She was visiting from out of town, and I'd taken her to the nice restaurant near my office. So tell me, she said over salads, was it worth it? All the stress and uncertainty of standing up for yourself. Absolutely. I can't imagine still being in that old situation, grinding away and hoping someone would notice. I'd probably be burned out by now. Or I'd have left for another company where the same patterns would eventually emerge. Your father was worried at the time that you'd get fired. I told him you wouldn't, that you were too smart and too valuable. But I'll admit I had some sleepless nights. So did I admitted. But Mom, here's what I realized. I was already being exploited. The only question was whether I'd keep accepting it. And once I saw that clearly, I couldn't unsee it. Good. She reached across and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you. Not just for the title and the success, but for having the courage to know your worth. Back at the office that afternoon, I had a meeting with a new hire named Jasmine Ford. She'd been with us for 3 months and had requested a one-on-one. Thank you for making time, Jasmine said, sitting in one of my office chairs. She looked nervous. Of course. What's on your mind? I've been getting pressure from my project manager to take on some additional responsibilities. Mentoring a summer intern, leading a working group on process improvements, that sort of thing. And I want to be helpful, but I'm already working at capacity with my regular assignments. I recognized myself in her dilemma. The eagerness to prove herself. The fear of seeming unhelpful or uncommitted. The assumption that saying yes to everything was the path to advancement. What did you tell your project manager? I asked. I said I'd think about it. But honestly, I don't know how I'd fit it in without working nights and weekends. Then the answer should be no. Or more specifically, the answer should be, I'm interested in these opportunities, but I need to understand how they fit into my role and development plan, and what we can remove from my plate to make capacity. Jasmine looked surprised. I can say that? You can and should. Jasmine, let me tell you something. Early in my career, I said yes to everything. I worked nights and weekends. I mentored people informally. I took on projects outside my role. And you know what happened? You got promoted? Eventually. But first I got taken advantage of. I was doing senior-level work for junior-level pay because I'd made it easy for the company to extract that value without compensating me for it. Don't make the same mistake. But how do I advance if I don't go above and beyond? You go above and beyond within your actual role. You excel at your assigned work. You find ways to improve efficiency or quality. You build strong client relationships. And when opportunities arise that genuinely align with your development, you take them, but as part of a formal plan with clear expectations and recognition. I pulled up a document on my computer and turned the screen toward her. This is the development framework for your level. These are the competencies you need to demonstrate for promotion. None of them require you to work for free or sacrifice your well-being. Talk to your project manager about how the opportunities they're suggesting map to these competencies. If they don't, politely decline. If they do, negotiate scope and capacity. Jasmine was reading the framework intently. This is really helpful. I wish I'd had this conversation 3 months ago. Well, you have it now. And Jasmine? Part of professional maturity is learning to set boundaries. Anyone who tells you that boundaries make you uncommitted or unambitious is trying to exploit you. After she left, I thought about how different that conversation was from the one I might have had with Blake 3 years ago. Blake would have told her to be a team player, to prove her dedication, to trust that hard work would be rewarded eventually. I was telling her to protect herself first, to demand clarity and fair treatment, to refuse to subsidize dysfunction. Some people might call that cynical. I called it honest. 5 years after that Tuesday afternoon, I was keynoting a women's leadership conference. My topic: the myth of going the extra mile. We're taught that advancement comes from exceeding expectations. I told the audience of about 200 professional women. That if we just work hard enough, smart enough, long enough, we'll be recognized and rewarded. And sometimes that's true. But sometimes it's a trap. I shared my story. The promotion I'd been denied, the decision to set boundaries, the fallout and eventual success. But I was careful to contextualize it. I want to be clear, I was lucky in some key ways. I had financial stability that let me take the risk of potential termination. I had an executive who was paying attention and willing to intervene. I work in an industry where my skills are in demand. Not everyone has those advantages. But here's what's universal: understanding your value and refusing to accept less than you deserve. That might mean setting boundaries in your current role. It might mean leaving for a better opportunity. It might mean starting your own business. The specific path matters less than the fundamental principle. You are not obligated to subsidize your own exploitation. During the Q&A, a young woman in her 20s raised her hand. What if setting boundaries means you get labeled as difficult or not a team player? Isn't that career suicide? It can be, I acknowledged. And that's real risk you have to assess for your situation. But I'd argue that if setting reasonable professional boundaries gets you labeled as difficult, you're working in a toxic environment anyway. The question isn't whether you'll face consequences for having boundaries. It's whether you'll face consequences now on your terms, or later after you're burned out and have given years of undercompensated work. Another woman asked, "How do you handle the guilt?" I feel guilty saying no even when I'm legitimately at capacity. The guilt is real, and it's particularly acute for women because we're socialized to be accommodating. What helped me was reframing it. Every time I said yes to something that wasn't my responsibility, I was saying no to something that was. I was saying no to doing my actual job excellently. I was saying no to my own well-being. I was saying no to sustainable performance. Once I saw it that way, the guilt shifted. I felt more guilty about abandoning myself than about disappointing people who were asking too much. After the conference, several women approached me with their own stories. A financial analyst who'd been doing her manager's job for 2 years with no promotion. A marketing director who'd built an entire department but was being passed over for VP in favor of external hires. A software engineer who'd been told she was too technical to move into management, despite mentoring half the development team. Each story was different in the details but the same in the fundamentals. Talented women doing excellent work, going above and beyond, and not being fairly compensated or advanced because their contributions had become expected rather than exceptional. I gave them all the same advice I'd wished someone had given me earlier. Document your contributions, understand your market value, set clear boundaries, and be prepared to walk if necessary. That evening, I got an email from the conference organizer. "Quinn, we've had over 50 requests for you to speak at other events. Are you interested in doing more of this?" I thought about it. My day job as VP was fulfilling, but there was something powerful about sharing this message more broadly. About maybe preventing other talented professionals from spending years in the trap I'd found myself in. I started speaking regularly, at conferences, company events, professional organizations. The message resonated because it was honest about something people rarely discussed openly. The fact that meritocracy is often a myth, and that advancement requires not just excellence but strategic self-advocacy. 7 years after my boundary-setting moment, Helen Wright retired. There was a big celebration, lots of speeches about her impact on the company. In her farewell address to the leadership team, she said something that stuck with me. "The best thing I did as CEO wasn't any specific strategic initiative or financial decision. It was paying attention when someone showed me that our systems were broken. Quinn Carter forced me to look at patterns I'd been ignoring. How we were exploiting our most dedicated employees, how we were losing talent because we took them for granted, how our promotion processes rewarded the wrong behaviors. Everything good that came after that started with her having the courage to stop accepting a bad situation. After the event, Helen pulled me aside. I mean that, you changed this company. You changed it, Helen. I just stopped enabling the problems. Exactly. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is withdraw your consent from a broken system. You did that, and it forced everyone else to confront realities we'd been avoiding. She smiled. Plus, you turned out to be an exceptional leader. So there's that. With Helen's retirement, there was a reshuffling of executive roles. I was offered Chief Analytics Officer, reporting directly to the CEO. It was a massive role, overseeing all data analytics functions across the company, setting strategic direction, managing a budget of millions. I accepted with one condition: that we conduct a company-wide audit of compensation equity and promotion practices. I wanted to make sure what had happened to me wasn't still happening to others. The audit revealed what I'd suspected: patterns of undercompensation and slow advancement for women and minorities, particularly those who were high performers in individual contributor roles. People who were too valuable to promote because promoting them would leave gaps that management didn't want to fill. We fixed it. Adjusted salaries, promoted deserving people, and implemented new systems to prevent the patterns from recurring. Cost the company money in the short term. But retention improved, performance improved, and our reputation as an employer improved. 10 years after that Tuesday afternoon, I was having coffee with Derek Paulson. He'd had a successful run at Apex Technologies and was now consulting. We'd stayed in touch over the years, and he was back in town for a conference. You know what's funny? Derek said. I got hired to replace you in a role you were already doing. Looking back, I can't believe how messed up that was. You didn't know. Hell, I barely understood it at the time. Yeah, but I should have asked questions. Should have wondered why an external candidate was needed when there was clearly internal talent. He shook his head. I've made it a practice now. Whenever I'm brought in as an external hire, I ask who the internal candidates were and why they weren't selected. Sometimes there are good reasons, but sometimes it's just bias or politics. That's good practice. Derek looked thoughtful. Do you ever regret how it went down? The tension, the confrontation? No, I said. I wish it hadn't been necessary, but I don't regret standing up for myself. He raised his cup. To standing up for yourself. And to people who notice when others are being undervalued. We clinked. Later, I found Blake on LinkedIn, promoted to partner at Hartley Consulting. I sent a quick message. Congratulations. Hope you're well. He replied within hours. Thanks, Quinn. Working with you taught me more about leadership than anything. You set a standard I'm still trying to live up to. And your CIO role? Well-deserved doesn't begin to cover it. It was gracious, and proof that sometimes people only grow after facing consequences. 15 years after my boundary-setting moment, a podcast host asked if critics were right that my approach was selfish or unambitious. I'd say they confuse ambition with self-sacrifice, I replied. Excelling at your job? Yes. Taking on recognized compensated stretch work? Absolutely. But doing someone else's job for free while they earn more? That's not proving yourself, it's being exploited. When asked if this worked for everyone, I was honest. I had leverage, skills, and demand financial stability, a leader who listened. Not everyone has that. But the principle stands. Know your value, demand fair treatment, and be ready to walk from chronic undervaluation. My advice to new professionals? Excel at your actual job. Build skills. Document your work. Understand your market worth. And ask, are my extra efforts rewarded, or just expected? If it's the latter, adjust. 20 years after Blake passed me over, I retired from Cascade Analytics. The company had grown, but more importantly, the culture had changed. Exploitation was no longer the norm. At my retirement party, Jasmine Ford, now a VP, gave the speech that meant the most. Early on, she said, I came to Quinn overwhelmed, thinking I had to say yes to everything. She told me, you're not obligated to subsidize your own exploitation. That changed everything. She didn't just succeed, she made it possible for the rest of us to succeed by teaching us to advocate for ourselves. I smiled. That had always been the goal. In my final speech, I kept it simple. 20 years ago, I learned the bravest thing you can do is stop accepting less than you deserve. Thank you for being part of the journey. After retiring, I consulted, wrote a book, and advised companies on fair advancement systems. Mostly, though, I lived. Traveling, reconnecting, adopting Hemingway to keep Fitzgerald company, finally enjoying life beyond 60-hour weeks. That Tuesday afternoon in Blake's office was one of the most important moments of my life. Not because I was passed over, but because it forced me to see I'd been complicit in my own undervaluation. The moment I stopped giving away my labor for free, everything changed. I stopped being someone things happened to, and became someone who made things happen. And that made all the difference.